So we've been going through Hebrews 11, all right, and the fun part of this is just going back and digging into all the places that we have been studying. So having gone from Abel through Joseph, today we're going to talk about Moses. All right. And I picked that song, The Great I Am, because Moses is the guy who said, okay, so what's your name? And God said to him in Exodus chapter 3, he said, I am that I am. Jehovah as a name became what was used most of the time, because they didn't like the idea of saying or even writing Yahweh. But Jehovah became the name. But basically, when you look for a definition of Jehovah, it just says the self-existent one. Okay. He was the only being who wasn't created. Okay. And the cool part is he actually created we looked at this last week or 2 weeks ago. And to David, and he said, you've made a body for it. Even though you're eternal, you made a body, which was Christ. So anyhow, so by faith, Moses, when he was born, he was hidden 3 months by his parents. Do you guys know the story about Moses? Do you understand what he went through? What happened? What was going on at the time? Because this is where we're going to go to Exodus chapter 2.
I watched the 10 Commandments.
There you go. That's pretty close. Morning, Lee.
The kid with the papyrus boat.
Oh, that's our kid. All right. Just plus that on them.
All right.
Morning.
Good morning.
Kevin, we got a couple of seats around the table here with us, man. Come up and join us. Just toss my phone here. That'll work. Thank you.
Saved this one, right? No, you're not. You gotta sit by the teacher for you.
Come in late, you have to see
Yeah.
the front.
Just so you know, Denny's watching.
Yeah. Up there. So
The thing that always amazed me about that is what it took for his mother, Moses' mother, to say, okay, I'm going to put you in this little raft and put you out. Go from there.
and here's the thing, if you look at what it says, she could no longer hide him. When she could no longer hide him, she made an ark of bulrushes for him, daubed it with asphalt and pitch, put the child in it, and laid it in the reeds by the river. She didn't toss him out into the river to go. Well, she got him someplace where she could still keep an eye on him. Okay, she just couldn't hide him anymore in her house because people were getting here. There's a baby, and they find out it's a boy. Why didn't you throw him into the river like all the rest of the boys were supposed to do? Okay, and she really didn't care what the king's commandment was. Okay, and actually, if we go back to the end of chapter 1. Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, every son who is born, you shall cast into the river, and every daughter you shall save alive. Okay. Trying
She did obey the letter of the law.
Huh?
She did obey the letter of the law. She put him in the river.
You're right. She
There's
certainly
nothing
did
about
put
a
him in the
boat.
river. So that's kind of what she was. Now Hebrews tells us. All right. Because he was a beautiful child, and they were not afraid of the king's command. All right. Here's the thing. This baby, this human life, is more valuable than our obedience to a king, our obedience to a government. Okay. And understanding that the king's command was an unrighteous command. Now, when you talk about all these guys in Hebrews, one of the other places, or these guys, this faith, you talked about the history of Israel. One of the other places you can go to get a synopsis of it is Acts chapter 7, which I actually don't. And who knows what happens in Acts chapter 7?
Stephen.
It's kind of, this Stephen gives us a historical review.
That's right. It's the sermon that got Stephen killed. Okay. But he basically goes through that. He talks about, let's see, he starts with Abraham, okay, talks about Isaac and Jacob, the 12 patriarchs, Joseph going into Egypt, okay. Jacob then going into Egypt and all of that. And then Moses being born, okay. He was brought up in his father's house for 3 months. Okay. So he even goes through and talks about it, and we'll get a little more into what Stephen says about it when we get a little deeper into Moses' story. But that's how Moses' story starts, and the faith of his parents saying, we're not going to fear the king, we're going to fear God in this thing concerning our child. Is what the guy talks about in Hebrews 11. Okay. The baby's sitting in a basket, side of the river. And she basically told his older sister, just keep an eye on it. Just, if anything happens to it. Well, something did happen to it. Pharaoh's daughter comes along and his maids pull him out and I love the foresight of Miriam here, because she runs to Pharaoh's daughter and says, can I find you a woman to nurse him? Because he's baby, he needs me. Can I go find you a wet nurse? Knowing that she's going to go get Moses' mother, and so he spends, and from that 3 months until he's weaned, basically, he spends that time in his mother and father's household. 3 years, 4, depending on when you think children were weaned. He was the baby boy. There's no record of any other children in the family, just Miriam and Aaron and Moses. So he could have been in his mother's house learning the concepts, or learning about the God of the universe, learning about Jehovah, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. All right. For 3 to 4 years, maybe. So by the time that she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, then he understood who his people were. Okay, so if you keep going, then in chapter 2, you got the whole thing where it's and when he was grown, he went out to his brethren, look at their burdens. Okay, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, and he killed him. Okay, and he finds out then the next day that somebody knew about it. And he ran. Okay, and then he ran. Okay, so let's now go back to Hebrews. So that's let's go that far. Let's go back to Hebrews 11 and look at what the writer of Hebrews brings out about this whole story. Okay, first off, they were not afraid of the king's command. So by faith, Moses, all right, but that's not actually Moses. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months. I don't know if you guys ever tried to hide a newborn for 3 months. Okay.
They don't cooperate.
Yeah, they don't. Okay. So then when he became of age, he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. Okay, he went out to see what his brothers were doing, saw the reproach, okay. Esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures of Egypt. By faith. Okay. By faith, he forsook Egypt. This isn't just that he ran away, not because it says here he's not fearing the wrath of the king. What it comes down to is he left Egypt in his heart. Go back and look at the forsake, that word there. It's talking about, it's not just that he ran away. He's like, he turned his back on Egypt entirely. All the learning that he had, everything that had been to him, everything. He said, I don't, so when he left Egypt to go be with his people, he forsook them. Now then he gets there and he kills him. Now he kills the guy and then he comes back and the guy there's a couple other guys who are fighting Hebrews and he says, why are you guys fighting each other? He goes, well, what are you gonna do about it? You gonna kill one of us like you killed them? That's what happens in Exodus 2. Stephen brings it up this way. But
they have raised him as a son. How did they pull that off?
who raised him as a son?
Well, the Pharaoh.
The
Pharaoh's
Egyptians?
daughter, yeah.
So here's the deal.
I mean,
How many people do you think that?
generally somebody's pregnant, they're gonna have a baby and all of a sudden they got a 3-month-old.
Well, what they say is we've adopted this child. They're not necessarily say where he came from.
Okay.
Okay. But
Nowadays, we go to Walmarts and buy a plastic baby doll with the daughter.
But no one would have questioned the Pharaoh's daughter.
no,
But it's still, the question that can come up is, okay, so now he's being raised in the Pharaoh's house. Where did the faith come from?
3 years with his mom and his dad as a baby.
As a baby.
The knowledge of who he was. And I mean, that's the only thing we can look to and say he had that kind of.
It's not written, there may be interaction between there and 40 years with his family, with his real family, maybe.
Wasn't his sister hired to take care of the baby?
His mother was.
His mother
Yeah,
was.
his mother was. So that's what I'm saying. So for up until the time where it was weaned, he was in his mother and father's house. Okay. Now that's the point. I mean, you talk about how hard it was to put that kid in a basket and leave him by the side of the river. There you're just hiding him. All right. Now he's been a part of your household for however long it takes to get to that point.
Yeah.
And now you're taking and giving him to the king who wanted to kill all of the babies like him, or the family of the king who wanted to kill all the babies.
But
Give
during
her
that
back.
time, those 3 years, there was certainly interaction and I'm sure she was speaking to her baby.
Oh, yeah,
So
that's
a
what
lot
I'm
of that
saying.
was spoken into her.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So just think about yourself. This issue, I got 3 years to speak into this kid's life. Okay. What am I going to speak into his life? Yeah, I'm gonna go back and tell him the stories of his family. I'm gonna make sure he understands. Every time I feed him, we're gonna talk about. He's gonna do basically ahead of time what Moses told him to do later. And which is, Moses wrote this later on. You shall talk about it when you walk in the house, when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you're eating it, all the time you should be talking about it. Is that what his mother did for him for 3 years?
And even today, they'll tell you that, most of a child's personality and characters and stuff are before they even start kindergarten.
Yeah, they're formed before that. Yeah. So that time frame, that time of growth and understanding stuff like that, she was able to speak into. Now, 37, 36 years later, takes it into his head to go out and see what these people that he knew about were actually living like, and he saw what they were doing. Stephen tells us that, he saw one of them suffer wrong. He defended and avenged him, struck down the Egyptian. And here's the thing. He supposed that his brethren would understand that God would deliver them by his hand, but they didn't understand. Okay. So and I don't know, is this an idea that God gave him while he was in Egypt, or is this an idea his mother put in his head? He's gonna be a deliverer, you're going to be in the home, in the house of Egypt, you'll be able to save.
Yeah.
Deliver us from the hand of the Pharaoh. Okay,
Well, who else would have been able to go before Pharaoh and say the things he did, because he got a little pass there for having been in the
well,
family so long.
different Pharaoh though.
Yeah,
Different Pharaoh, because all of the men that were looking for him had died when he went back. So anyhow, this is Moses. It's in Exodus chapter 2. Stephen tells a story about him there in Acts 7. He forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath that came, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. Okay. So I'm gonna go back just a bit here in Hebrews. I'm gonna point out just a few things. Okay.
So there was times Moses was very strong in his faith. You know, other times he was a little wishy-washy kind of guy.
He's a man just like the rest of us.
Just like the rest of us.
So,
Gives us hope.
yes, exactly. Abraham waited for a city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Okay. Sarah judged him faithful who had promised. Okay. These all died in faith, having promises. Okay. Embraced and confessed they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. We didn't talk about this last week, but if you go to where Jacob met Pharaoh, okay. Pharaoh says, "How old are you?" And he goes, and he talks about, he says, "The days of my pilgrimage have been 130 years. And they haven't been as long as the days of my father and my grandfather's children." All right. But even he talked about, Jacob was talking about, they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. That's in Genesis 48, when Jacob goes before Pharaoh. When we talked about how Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Well, the conversation that they had right after that was this thing about how old Jacob was. And he talks about my pilgrimage. Okay, that's why the guy in Hebrews brings this up. They're talking about this. Okay, so here's the thing. They seek a homeland. All right.
what
Okay.
chapter are we in there?
This is Hebrews 11. Okay. This is stuff we've studied already. He prepared a city for them. And what I'm trying to point out is that these guys are seeing things beforehand. All right. He received Isaac. Abraham received Isaac back from the dead in a figurative sense. All right. We talked about that last week. Okay. Joseph made mention of the departure of them. Okay. So now Moses looked to the reward, esteemed the reproach of Christ greater than the riches of Egypt, for he looked to the reward. Okay. For he endured as seeing him who is invisible. All right. So let me go back to the beginning of Hebrews 11. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Okay, they looked for a city that wasn't there. All right, they looked forward to a reward they couldn't see. They looked to him who was as seeing him who was invisible. Okay. When we're talking about faith, we're talking about looking at stuff and saying, and we look at the stars, okay, that are visible, is that okay, that builds our faith up. But our faith is really the idea that we look at that and we say, okay, we see the stars, but what we believe in is the invisible one who created them. Okay, but faith is it's the evidence of things not seen. All right. So back to Moses. By faith, he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, lest he destroy the firstborn, unless he who destroyed the firstborn should touch them. All right. he just talks about this, just like that. That's all he says about multiple chapters in Exodus. Okay, there's one event, he skips over all the plagues, he gives all that other stuff that were all by faith. If you read out of that. I'm gonna a quick pause here. Hey, you guys who joined online, my timing, we've got a free version of Zoom running. It's gonna kick you out. I'm gonna restart it right after that, so just come back on.
Okay.
All right.
Gotcha.
So he kept the Passover, the sprinkling of blood. For that, we're gonna go to Exodus 12. All right. And if you read this whole thing, it talks, God says, hey, look, this is, we're gonna start a new calendar. Okay, this is now gonna be the first month of your calendar. All right, and this month will be, and you're gonna have to do Passover. And he talks about you're gonna take the lamb on the 10th of the month. Okay, you're gonna take the lamb, and on the 14th of the month, you're gonna take the lamb into your house. Okay, it's going to be with you, you're gonna keep it and on the 14th, you'll kill it. Okay, take the blood from it, you're going to use the blood to go across the lintel and down the side posts. Okay, interesting, not on the threshold where you would walk on it. All right, but across the lintel and down the side posts. Put blood there, and so take some of the blood and put it on the two door posts on the lintel of the house, or they're going to eat it. Okay, they have to eat it all that night, and you eat it all. Don't leave anything, but you don't eat, you're going to burn. Okay. And the blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. The plague will not be on you to destroy you when I start the end of Egypt. Okay. You tell me the rest of the story of that night.
And they left.
Yeah, but just the story of that night. What happened?
A lot of death.
The angel of death passed around Egypt.
They came back on the
Killed
Egyptians.
the firstborn of the people and of the cattle. And but not the Israelites who had this blood over them, go away untouched.
There was not a house where there was not one dead. Throughout the whole land of Egypt. It's a big area. Okay. From the firstborn of Pharaoh to the firstborn of a captive in the dungeon. Okay, firstborn of all the livestock. Gone. All right. By faith, they kept the Passover and the sprinkling of it. This had never happened before. So Moses comes in and says, hey, look, you guys are going to take the lamb, hang on to it for, take it on the 10th. All right, hang on to it for 4 days. And then you're going to kill it. All right, and then you're going to take that blood, and you're going to put it on your door.
It's got to seem a little
And
bizarre.
then you're
just
gonna
out
do
of
it. These guys were shepherds. They knew how to kill lambs, so that wasn't new. But the whole idea is taking the blood and putting it on the doorpost. Okay, and an angel of death's going to come to us. Like, I can't do that, right? Okay, so anybody with that attitude is dead. Okay, or their brother was dead. Or, is that a good way to get rid of an older brother? I don't know. Being a younger brother, I was fine. Yeah, I'm fine with this.
Move up in the inheritance line.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. But so here's the thing. They had to believe Moses, they had to believe in something they hadn't seen before. They had to believe that this was going to happen. To do all this, okay? Moses has been gone for 40 years and he's never been a slave like us. All right, he's coming in and he's telling us all this stuff. They had some, if you read through that up to Exodus up to this point, the leaders of Israel, they didn't really believe Moses when he showed up. Okay, even though God gave him some signs and said, here, put your stick down so it turns into a snake, and and put your hand in your shirt, and bring it out, let person get
Yeah,
it
but
back.
he had a lot of belief in him. Otherwise, how would he approach and talk to a burning bush?
Well, that was, that was curiosity more than anything. When you read Exodus 3, he saw it and he goes, well, let me go see what this is like. I don't get this. He gets close and the guy says, oh, hang on, take your shoes off. Okay, this isn't just an odd natural phenomenon. This is happening because of someone who's an unseen.
This is a lonely guy out in the wilderness that had nobody around but his sheep.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, this is also a guy, I've talked to this about my kids. I mean, this guy was raised in Egypt with a pharaoh in a palace where, he was with the
people
elite.
everywhere.
Knowledge was everywhere, he was over people. He was the man, he escaped and went out and for 40 years lived with sheep. You didn't have a whole lot of people to talk to out there except the Lord.
Just for discussion, not to take, and if it takes you off track. Just say
No,
this,
go ahead.
okay. So he's in Egypt, okay? So he realizes that he's of a different people, even though he grew up in the Pharaoh's house. He sees one of his people being mistreated, so he kills a guy. And evidently, he's good for it for a day until somebody says, "Hey, we saw you do that." Then he ran. Okay. My worldly sense says, gee, if I believe in God and I have the protection of Pharaoh's house, why did he run?
Because Pharaoh was the one that was after, for one. All right, that's what it tells us.
Was,
Here, when Pharaoh heard of the matter, he sought to kill Moses. Okay, he had a good reason for running.
Okay.
All right. But you're right, where was
But
his
again,
faith?
where's his faith? Because even if we go back to his mother had faith to put him in this little basket, okay? So there's an example of faith that doesn't have a logical reason other than the love of God. Okay? So here though, it's like, okay, I did all these things, now I'm running. I would have thought you would have said, hey, look at all this faith I've been living with instead of